So we want to avoid a lateral shift of the pelvis, an anterior tilt of the pelvis, a posterior tilt of the pelvis, a rotation of the pelvis, a hike of the pelvis. If you have really good hip mobility exercises, you can stay on top of that stuff so it just never happens. We are going to give you a sneak peek behind our movement and mobility live seminar. This section is all about pelvis alignment and how you can feel knocked off and stuck in certain positions, but muscles control the bones. The bones don't just do things by themselves, so you can retrain that yourself. We are going to cover the 6 hip principles with you: flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, internal rotation, and external rotation. And we're also going to give you the 4 exercises that work on all 6 that you can do from home without needing to see a professional. So the first one that we have here is to test our flexion. This is the deep lunge test. You're ideally wanting to have the elbow down beside the heel with a vertical shin. So this addresses any kind of adductor tightness and it works on the hip flexion. If you're able to do that on both sides, you're gonna have a lovely squat, you're able to go up and down, yay! But if she's not able to get down on both sides, that is gonna look like this. The knees are gonna start to cave in. There's not gonna be enough room to be able to get down into that bottom position. So if Jenny wasn't able to get down on this side, oh, she's stuck, left leg's all tight, but she could totally get down on the other side, the right side's totally fine, then what we're gonna see is a squat that's wonky. So if things are tight and restricted on one side, your body's gonna shift to compensate. The couch stretch, so if Jenny's able to get into a couch stretch for me, back leg here, we're working on the extension. So we're trying to make sure that we're opened up in the front here, so we're able to extend the hips fully. That means JP can stand up lovely and nice, he's nice and tall, but if she was tight on both sides, so she couldn't do the couch stretch fully on both sides, she was unable to open up her hip, boom, the anterior tilt. Oh, look at that. That's the Insta picture right there. So if it's tight on both sides, you're gonna feel compressed. So if there's no space at the front for JP to stand up straight, he's gonna have to go and crank here. And then you imagine if you're deadlifting, for example, he's deadlifting. It's not a good position to overextend into. If he's deadlifting, every time he comes up to the top, if he goes into that position, all that pressure goes to that bottom point. Doesn't look nice, does it? But that's what some of us are doing. We just don't know. If the couch stretch was tighter on one side compared to the other, that's going to be a rotation of the pelvis. And that's that idea that you would feel one glute is maybe a lot stronger than the other one because you literally can't extend the hips properly. So those 2 first ones were for range of motion of the hips. The next one here, we're into a strength test, the side plank. Boo! Anyone that has SMM knows there's a certain point where it's lovely, feels great, and then you hit the side plank march, and it's just awful. So what this does here is to test the overall stability of your hips, and this is something that we like to see as a test for people. Can you support yourself on each leg individually, okay? This means you can hold yourself up. That's a pretty important skill. If you struggle to do this, JP will demonstrate what happens to you. You have no stability. You shouldn't even be walking around, let alone trying to lift weights. If you can't hold yourself up, don't add more to that, okay? So that is a fundamental skill. It's not a silly exercise that I just like. There's lots of reasoning behind that one. So the last one here is our internal and our external hip rotation. So the front leg of the 90-90 is your external hip rotation. So if we just focus on that for a second, if that's really limited, so if JP was sitting down, you're trying to go cross-legged, if you couldn't sit upright in your 90-90 and your knee was up and you're like really you were cramping almost in this position, JP, boom, not able to sit cross-legged. JP doesn't like this at all. But if we give that external rotation back, oh, lovely jubbly. And again, if there was one side tighter than the other, if Jenny was really struggling on one side but the other side was okay, same with cross-legged, knee in the face on one side, oh, it's coming at you from all angles. There can be crossover with a lot of movements, so if JP goes into his squat again for me, if his external rotation is limited, then he's going to struggle to keep the knees out in that position. And if the internal rotation, so the back leg now, this is the one that's internally rotated. So if that's limited, he's going to struggle to do hinging movements. So he's going to not be able to access that. So he's going to have to round his back essentially to get into the position because he's not actually able to move properly. So if your hips aren't rotating properly, if there's a difference side to side with your 90-90, again, the wonky squat can come back in. You'll be squatting to one side because your hips literally don't have the space to get into position. So that's why these movements are so important. They're not just silly exercises. They're to make the fun stuff better, and so that you don't end up just lying in a heap. It's so kind of way. Yeah. So if you don't want to end up like that, you got to do all of that. So guys, hopefully that will drive home the importance of some of these things for you guys. They are not just little exercises that are like, oh, that looks quite nice on an Instagram reel. It's like literally every one of these movements that we're teaching you here today is for a specific reason, and it's the things that will stop you having little owies or recurring bouncing pain. What I love especially about the 90-90 and the side plank is that they cover 2 of the hip functions with 1 exercise. How awesome is that? It's like my favorite thing in the world. If you work on these movements all regularly and improve on them, it will stop any of those rotations and hikes and shifts of the pelvis that you can have. You are the best person to fix you. If you enjoyed this video, you will love this.